You're listening to the Second Look Podcast, where we take a closer look at what we're learning each Sunday at Connection Church to help you grow in your walk with Christ. Here are your hosts, Pastor Joe Terreri and Pastor Dan DeRochers.
Welcome to the Second Look. My name is Dan.
My name is Joe.
And we're here talking about once you were, but now he has. But first, hey, Joe.
Good morning, Dan.
How are you this morning?
Doing good, Dan.
Good. Joe, very few people are as proud of where they are from as Carrie Brooks and you.
And me, yes.
You are so proud to be a Buffalo native.
Oh, totally.
Why?
Oh, you don't get it. You don't get it. Here's why. Let me tell you why I'm so... You know what? Can I just take a moment and just say, speaking of being a Buffalo native, I just want to take a quick moment and wish a happy birthday.
Here we go.
Wish a happy birthday to one of our very faithful listeners, my dad, John Terreri. It is John Terreri, who still lives in Buffalo, New York, who raised me with my mom, Sally, and it is his birthday today. I believe he is 73 today, and just want to say how much I love my dad, appreciated him, and he has given the Terreri children a strong legacy of faith, and I just want to say, Dad, we love you, and you're an awesome man of God.
That was awesome.
Yes, and just also want to say, why do I love Buffalo? There's a few reasons. Number one, because we're survivors. Number two, because we're underdogs. Number three, because our pizza is better than all the other pizza in the world. Number four, because we actually know how to do wings. And if these people who live in southeastern Pennsylvania keep putting their wings in foil containers with plastic lids.
Not good.
Not good. All
Not
you
good.
do is steam the wings.
That's
and
it.
they get it's
Soft and
terrible.
rubbery.
Yep, soft and rubbery. And so the pizza's the best. We're overcomers. And then, of course, the Buffalo Bills, who continually let us down, always break our hearts. But is it weird that Josh Allen is one of my favorite human beings?
Maybe.
That as a 42-year-old grown man, that this 27-year-old kid from Firebaugh, California, Joshua Patrick Allen, is one of the people in my life who I'm like, I love this man in a very heterosexual way, but I love this man. He is just such a good guy. And so I love Western New York. And like, here's what Buffalo is like. There's a blizzard every 20 minutes. And people in Buffalo literally go to the homes of where the Buffalo Bills players live, and they shovel their driveways so they can get to the airport and go play their game. If that happened in Philadelphia, the Eagles would call the police. But in Buffalo, New York, we are the city of good neighbors, and we love people well. But here's the thing, Dan. I'm thrilled to live in Southeast Pennsylvania. We love it here, and this is our home now.
Well, this has been another episode of this. Just kidding.
You touched a place in my heart that was very raw, very deep, and very profound.
Wow. I mean, what that brought a lot of value here, Joe.
It did.
And
it did.
it gives us
might have
connection.
alienated most of the audience.
It's possible, but you did bring it back to southeastern Pennsylvania.
Yes, and we love being here, and this is our home now. And Cheryl and I always say how much we love living here.
Joe,
So,
there's value in knowing where we came from.
right.
There's actual value with you being so passionate about where you're from.
Mm-hmm.
And you read Jenny from the Block yesterday.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But there's even greater value.
Which was a much better story than Andrew Carnegie, but keep going. Much better.
remembered.
Far more relatable.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
But there's so much more value in remembering who we once were.
Yes.
Right? Where we came from before we were transformed by Jesus. Is that also true of people like you and I who literally had our diapers changed in church bathrooms?
Right. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I do think there is an element of what we talked about yesterday where Paul is talking to people who were all not growing up in, quote, Christian homes. And yet, there is value in knowing who we would be without Christ.
That's good.
Because, I shared in one service yesterday, and I don't always share everything in every service, but I shared in one service yesterday, like I came to Christ when I was 6 years old, and I still remember my dad coming into my bedroom, and I asked him before he prayed for me for the night to help me invite Christ into my heart. And so, I think that these are beautiful stories. We call these boring testimonies,
Right.
where it's like, but I still think there's value in knowing that, even for my own children, Lucy, Olivia, Joseph, Ezra, who are growing up in a pastor's home, and we talk about Jesus often, there's value for them in knowing that without Christ, like, that's who they are. They're enemies of God. And so no matter if we came to Christ at a very young age like I did, or we came to Christ in our 40s or 50s or 60s, whenever we did, there's value in knowing where we came from and who we were without Jesus, or who we would be without Jesus.
Yeah. And yet, for maybe we're at increased risk for those that are longtime Christians of becoming distracted,
Absolutely.
apathetic, disconnected. We talk about it often here in this setting about how we are prone to wander and how we have leaky minds and we forget who we are in Christ.
Yeah, and I think that's part of why we need corporate worship. That's actually one of the reasons we go to church. Like when people are like, does church matter? Does Sunday morning matter? It's like, absolutely. But it's not for the reason you might think. It's not to check a box. It's because your heart needs to be in the presence of God and be reminded of the glory and the power of Jesus Christ, because we are prone to forgetfulness.
Yeah. The first part of your message was about life before Jesus.
Yes, I like to call that the depressing part of the message.
And you talk about how we were alienated from God, we were enemies of God. And we actually got a question from Diane, an alert listener, and she asked this question: are all non-believers considered evil in God's eyes? Or do they have to be intentionally proactive in their hatred of God to be considered evil?
Well, if I would just let the text speak, Paul is speaking to people who are Christians in Colossae who are majority Gentile. Okay, so these are not people who were once Jewish. These were Gentiles. And he labels all of them. Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your mind because of your evil behavior. And so I think Diane's question is so helpful because I think it pinpoints a struggle we have, which is calling everyone far from Christ an enemy of God.
That's pretty offensive.
It's incredibly offensive. And that's why we need to understand that we call the gospel good news, because our current state can only be defined as the bad news. Like, it is bad news. We are far from God. And Dan, I don't know why you're laughing, because this is a very serious subject. Well, we're not going to talk about why you're laughing. Anyway, but yes, but this goes back to the doctrine of original sin.
Yeah.
And we inherit our sinful nature from Adam, and this is who we are. This is what we're born into. We're sinners by both nature and choice. Because when we think of evil, when we hear the word evil, what comes to mind? Hitler,
Right.
Stalin, Mussolini, all the people that were like, we're not like them. And you don't want to look at your neighbor who's out there cutting his grass, just trying to raise his family, but not interested in Jesus. You're not looking at that guy and you're being like, that guy's an enemy of God.
Right.
But that's the thing. When we ignore God, when we live life on our own terms, what we're actually doing is we're not giving God his due. We're treating him like an enemy. Because what we fail to understand before we come to Christ is that our Creator has claim on our lives. He is owed, he is due worship and honor and glory from those he's created. And to ignore him or placate him or just kind of say, and this is what a lot of people do, listen, I'm not opposed to religion. I think it's great when people have faith. It's just not for me. See, we want to create this category of people who are just neutral.
Yeah.
And that is, in some ways, the ultimate form of evil. which is redefining the rules around what God says is true about us. Like, how evil is that? For you to believe that you have the right to define the rules of your own life and what God is and what God is not. I mean, and we don't think deeply enough about this because we want to be nice.
Yeah.
And we don't want to be mean, but we want to be honest. We want to be honest about the fact that we are people who want to live life autonomous from God. And that's where God says, like, your life is mine. And when you're running from me, you become my enemy. Difficult. I know this is hard. But this is why the gospel is so thrilling.
Yeah.
And God is so good and loving and gracious and merciful and kind. But that's why we stay silent during worship, Dan. That's why we just observe. Because we aren't in awe of the God that has rescued us. We aren't until we go down to the depths of our wretchedness, we don't get to see the beauty and the glory and the power and the grace of God.
I want to dig into this a little bit more, because I think many people who are not in touch with that reality would say, I'm a pretty good person.
Sure.
Right? I think a lot of people would say, yeah, I'm a pretty good person.
Yep.
I'm not
I don't steal. I don't murder. I don't,
Right.
I'm nice to people. I volunteer.
Exactly.
Yes.
But there's a difference between being a pretty good person and doing some of those things or avoiding some of the moral failings of life,
Right.
versus goodness in the eyes of God. Are we just like defining good in a different way?
No. Yes. We because the standard that God has for us is perfection. Like, God expects perfection.
Yeah.
Because he is a holy God. And because he is a holy and a just God, he cannot look at what we would consider normal small acts of rebellion against him and just say, it's okay. Everyone looks at porn. It's okay. Everyone gossips about people behind their back. It's okay. Everyone in America is greedy and keeps all of their money for themselves. It's okay. Everyone loses it with their kids sometime. It's okay. It's okay. We all struggle with racism. It's okay. We're all condescending towards this people group. Like, our real issue, Dan, is that we think we're good people because we create our own standards. And that's where our evil exists. A lot of us create this grid that is not God's grid for what it means to be good. What it means to be good is to be exactly like Jesus. Jesus has shown us the definition of goodness, and none of us have done that. Romans 3:23, all have sinned and fallen short of God's glorious standard. And that's who we are as human beings. We are the fallen short ones. And it's not that we are incapable of doing good things. It's that at the core of who we are not good enough. We are evil. And as Paul says, the flesh, there's this part that our old nature, the flesh, it does evil acts. And it's not that we never do anything good, or we never do anything helpful, or we never do anything kind. Yeah. It's just that's not all of who we are. Our sin still needs to be dealt with.
And when we're in Christ, holy is our identity.
I was thinking about this this morning. Yes.
How amazing is that?
It's not just that God forgives. It's not just that God looks at our sin and says, I forgive you. Reconciliation doesn't leave us in this space where we're no longer offensive to God. It brings us into relationship with God. And I love this idea that God takes his enemies, and through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and by those enemies trusting in Jesus Christ, enemies become friends. Enemies become sons and daughters. Enemies become intimate with God in the sense that there is closeness and fellowship and a real depth of knowing the living God. And we don't stay like to be forgiven is not to be neutral. It's all of a sudden we go from these people who are evil and hostile to God, and we become holy and faultless and without accusation. Like, it is a total and holistic transformation. And so God is so good in the transformation he brings into our life. He is not simply tolerating us. He is drawing us in to be close to him and to walk with him.
And so in Jesus, right, we are reconciled to God. And yet Paul's message to the Colossians is, even though it's by grace we've been saved, right? His message is, make sure you put in the effort to stay right with God. So,
well, no, he says, continue in your faith, meaning the only way to become holy, to become free, or to be without blemish, and to be free from accusation, the only way to be reconciled to God is through faith in Jesus, through trusting in Christ. And so that's not about effort. That's about faith. Because what can happen to people who are Christians is we're no longer trusting in Jesus for our relationship with God. We begin to trust in something else, or we forsake him. And this is what false teaching is ultimately after, and Satan is behind all false teaching. And false teaching is meant to help you begin to trust in something other than the gospel of Jesus Christ, the person of Jesus Christ. And so it's not about effort. It's about, I think about Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, where it talks about fixing our eyes on Jesus. It's like, yes, the only thing that keeps us, or like how we stay in this place of reconciliation, is simply, I just keep following Jesus.
yeah.
I just keep trusting him. I'm not trusting in myself. I'm not trusting in my righteousness. I'm not trusting in my giving record, church attendance, my service in ministry, my life as a pastor, my morality. I'm trusting in Christ alone, because only he can make me holy.
Why is it so hard to stay, to have that perseverance, to stand firm in your faith? Like, why does our world attract us away? Like, what you're describing is amazing. And yet we're willing to walk away or to stray.
Yeah. I can think of three things that, like, the why. I think the number one, and these are not in order, but number one is worldliness. The attractiveness of the world, meaning, you told me a story several months ago about your daughter Piper, how she had $50 and she wanted to, quote, get all the things. Yes. Like, I love that. Like, she had $50 and it's like, Piper, what do you want to buy? And she's like, I want to get all the things. And it's like, I totally get that.
Yeah.
You get it, I get it. There is a sense where the world is glittery and attractive, and we don't want to miss out. And Jesus said that if you're going to follow him, there's a narrow road ahead. Broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many are on it. Narrow is the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. So there is a constraining reality of following Jesus Christ. There is a life of obedience, submission, surrender. And by the way, that's where all the life and the joy and the peace is. But the world is glittery. So worldliness is the first reason we would not continue following Jesus. The second reason is Satan. Satan wants nothing more than for you to quit, for you to cash it in, and for you to believe you're not that bad, you don't need Jesus that much, and life is not actually found in him. Jesus Christ has come to give us life and life to the full, but the enemy has come, the thief has come to steal, kill, and destroy. And what Satan is trying to do is to bring into your life a kind of theft that robs you of the joy of walking closely with Jesus Christ. And then the third reason is the deceitfulness of our own heart, Jeremiah 17:9. That our hearts betray us, that our hearts are wicked, and that our hearts lie to us, that there is something better, something more satisfying in the world than knowing and continuing on with Jesus. And so we need to fight against our flesh, we need to fight against worldliness, and we need to fight against Satan. And we need to take our stand, and as I said yesterday, dig our heels in, and we need to be able to say, Jesus, I'm going to keep following you, I'm going to keep obeying you, and I'm going to keep trusting you.
And this is something that someone can do even if they're not from Buffalo. Is that correct?
I knew it. Dan, I knew it. Pouring my heart out, and we always have to end like this. Yep. But yes,
it's
you
our
don't
shtick.
have.
It's our thing.
Listen, you have a distinct advantage from being from Buffalo because you know what it's like to overcome and be disappointed, because you have lots of opportunities for character development being from Buffalo. But
you know what it's
and
like,
especially from Boston, anyone from the New England area, you are going to struggle because you're used to everything just going well for you all the time in the sports world. And I just want you to know that's not how life works.
Yeah, Joe knows what it's like to be not that good. This has been another episode of The Second Look. You can catch this sermon and much more at our website, cometoconnect.com. Have a great week.
Rude.